in the future, like when the AI can simulate all of the different DNA sort of like combinations, it's going to start building life. And it'll start with things we don't care about that we already allow GMO stuff with, which is like plants. Then it's going to be animals. Then some country, it's going to be like illegal here in the US, but some countries are going to allow you to do it for humans. And then all the bets are off, dude. We're the slow version. The biological version, evolution takes a while. You got to go around the sun a bunch of times in order to give things time to change. But in the future, change is going to be at the speed of computation. Evolution even is going to be at the speed of computation. The human genome isn't going to require changes in our external environment to be modified. It's going to be modified with CRISPR, 7.0 or whatever version we're on. The thing about Bittensor is it's so damn flexible that maybe we weren't the first with agents or whatever, but if you think about it, like miners are actually agents. It's just not called an agent. It's called a miner. It's just like a very focused agent, especially like early on, you'd take your model, your 7 billion parameter model, you'd fine tune it on a bunch of training data so that it could participate in a subnet in the most effective way, or participate in the only subnet and the only network running if you go back long enough. And that's essentially what is happening with agents. I mean, there's all kinds of different things happening with agents now because AI is developed as well, but we were like the original. We had all the agents before everyone even was calling them agents. Dude, I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I don't know. I do think about it a lot, and I've taken this question into some other spaces where I kind of can get some answers on these things sometimes. And I would say that like the weirdest, coolest, scariest things that you can possibly imagine that will happen as a result of using this technology, all of it's going to happen. Almost all of it.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we are joined by Keith Singery, the Bittensor Guru, who shares his personal journey into decentralized technologies, from early cryptocurrency experiences to a top validator and podcast host. Keith has a unique perspective on decentralized systems and emerging technologies, from psychedelics to robotics to AGI. In this conversation, we'll explore the pivotal moments that shaped his journey into Bittensor and extrapolations of future trends in intelligence as we transcend the boundaries of human understanding, where technology and our perception of reality converge. And now, to Keith with the 18th Ventura Labs podcast. All right, Keith, the Bittensor Guru. I want to ask you a very simple question to start off here. What inspired you to start your podcast? Why did you start the Bittensor Guru podcast?
When you get involved in something like Bittensor, you are surrounded by people that are like heavy contributors, and at the level that I am in, basically like pot committed here with my entire life, and my finances all revolve around the success of this project. I really tried to find the best way for me to use my skills and what I've been working on pretty much my whole life to make an impact on the project, and to basically just use my like secret sauce to make the whole Bittensor sandwich taste a little bit better. So I spent like 10 and a half years in almost like a business development type role, in like a traditional corporate setting. And the last few years I was flying around the world, sort of like selling technology to people who didn't really understand it, and actually selling technology to people that would likely replace like many of the processes that they and their teams were doing the slow manual way. Ironically, this is what Bittensor and AI is doing to, the human race, essentially, is, taking the things that we have spent our lives doing and, allowing us to put those to the side, let the machines do the grunt work, the heavy compute, the spreadsheets, all the meaningless tasks, even the manual labor stuff's going to get picked up by AI eventually. And so it was really just a natural fit once I understood Bittensor, after being in it and around it for so long. I was a moderator early on. for 6 or 9 months or something in the early Discord. So that allowed me to like see the project from every angle. So it was just a natural fit. Like once subnets launched, really, that's when the amount of content reached a level where like someone like you or I could come in and start generating media for people to digest. Because prior to that, honestly, there wasn't, like, if you're putting something together weekly, there just wasn't enough really going on to do a legitimate kind of podcast or even video series for it. So that's what led me to this conversation today.
Yeah, it's been quite the road. You're an OG. You're an OG for sure. You've been in
I
it.
wasn't there at the beginning, but I did get in pretty early on with some mining. I started mining in April of 2022, and I got 3 miners up and running. There was only one subnet at the time. There wasn't even a subnet. There was just one net, and I got 7 tau before my miners got deregistered. This was actually in the time where like the network was transitioning from CPU to GPU. And there was a lot of like hesitancy from existing miners who'd been mining for 6 months or so, like moving over to GPU. And I'd like tried the CPU side, and I was like caught in that maelstrom, really unsure of what was going on, but I did earn some tau. I got so frustrated when my miners got booted out that I gave away the tau. I just sent it to some guy that I knew who was in the project. I was like, you take this. And then, not some guy, his name's Rian, but he's pretty active in Bitensor still. Anyway, then I came back like a month later, once I kind of had like an epiphany, reread the white paper, just like started to understand artificial intelligence and where it was probably going. And then I've been, pushing my chips in the middle ever since.
Yeah, what was that like epiphany moment for you where you're like, this is it, I'm all in now? Because you said you're at the point where you're pot committed now, but I assume it didn't start that way.
Yeah, like everybody who's in crypto, I have my, crypto story. I had like a false start with Bitcoin back in 2017. I pumped like 6 months of my salary into crypto, mostly into Bitcoin, but into pretty much everything. And there was a pretty nice market in the middle of 2017. And so I was like, oh, crypto is easy. This is great. Bitcoin, awesome. I sent the, what's the thing called? Is it Bitcoin? There was an early Bitcoin book by Andrew something I don't remember the dude's name. It's been so long. Anyway, I sent this book to like all the people I know. Like I used Amazon to like send it out to all my friends and family and stuff. No one bought any Bitcoin except me. And then in 2018, I started listening to Peter Schiff. Do you know who Peter Schiff is?
Oh yeah.
Peter Schiff's like this. For those of you that don't know, he's like a gold, like the biggest gold maxi there is. He has like gold company. He lives in Puerto Rico, and he's always saying Bitcoin's about to go to zero. He was saying it back then as well, and dude, I kind of believed him, and I kind of was like, oh, this Bitcoin thing, like I made a bunch of money from it. I'm gonna take my 4 or 5x and just get out. And so I sold all my crypto, every single bit of it, sold it for gold actually in 2018, and thought I was like smart. So thought I'd figured it all out, because gold then went up like 50%. Bitcoin then went up like 5,000%, so I was very humbled by that initial experience. But eventually I got back into crypto, got some Bitcoin going in 2021. And then in early 2022, I got involved in Discord. And mainly what was happening was like, there was just like a dearth of social outlets for me. I was living in northern Minnesota at the time, so I moved from the Chicago suburbs where I lived my whole life, moved up to northern Minnesota, started building mobile saunas and renting paddle boards and running an Airbnb. Just like did everything that like I wanted to do when I was working for the man. And I did all these things. They all made no money. Like they all made like I was like killing myself to make like 10% of what I made in my corporate job that I quit, And so I realized like, okay, like I can try working with my hands and just like scrape by for the rest of my life, live an honest, good life or whatever, develop some skills, like maybe eventually hire some people and create some teams around the ideas that I was kind of building around up there, particularly the mobile sauna thing. But then I just kind of realized, like, you know how easy that money came in 17 when I timed, or when I got lucky and just, got involved at the right time. And I figured, like, well, I better just give crypto another shot here. So I started selling all that gold that I had bought with my proceeds from the Bitcoin, which I still had most of it. Eventually, I sold the Airbnb that I had up there. Every other bag that I had been, like, experimenting with in 21, there was a couple different coins that I had. I started basically liquidating those and moving them into Bittensor. And really, by the end of 2022, I was fully in. So I don't really sell much. I sell a little bit of Tau just to, like, live. But I mean, you could see by the environment I'm recording in here, I'm not, like, living in the Taj Mahal or something. Like, I really try to live like a pretty Spartan lifestyle so that I can continue to double down on the emissions that I'm getting from Bittensor. But at the time, I put literally everything that I had into it. And the reason why I did that was there was all kinds, at that time in my life, I was having all of these synchronicities pop up, like a lot of them around personal things. I told some of these stories before on the pod. One of them with, like, the distance from the house my wife used to vacation at when she was in Germany, between Germany and Poland, and the house that I eventually moved to in Ely from Chicago. They were the exact same distance from each other, down to the 10th of a mile. And the way that we discovered this was, like, through another synchronicity. I won't tell the whole story now, but there was just like those kind of things just kept happening and happening up there when I like let go of the, living in someone else's dream and working for a corporation. And when I really started following my own stuff, all this amazing, like, magic stuff started to happen around me that hadn't been happening my whole life, including with Bittensor. And one of the main things that happened with Bittensor is there was this monk at the time named Yun Ru. Sounds very close to Yuma Rao, right?
Yeah.
The spelling's even just like a couple letters off. This guy was on the Duncan Trussell podcast and was telling this story about, like, a near-death experience that he had, where he had this sort of, like, vision and was taken through this other reality, and eventually at the end shown the future of humanity. And it was like a giant AI, like, crab thing in outer space. And that he had also written a book at the same time called Turtle Planet. And so I'm very, like, keyed into, like, Yunru, Yuma Rao. Yunru likes the AI. AI is Bittensor. This was before ChatGPT. Like, ChatGPT was around, but it hadn't really dropped yet, like ChatGPT 3.
Yeah.
So nobody was really using it. Like, it wasn't in the popular culture. No one would know. Like, if you referred to ChatGPT, there would be, like, what's that? Now everybody knows what it is. Or even, like, LLM, nobody knew what. They would think you're talking about, like, LL Bean or something. There was no LLM. Nobody would know what that was back in 2022, unless you're involved in machine learning. But at the time when I was deciding, like, how deep do I want to get into this Bittensor thing, and I was reading this book, Turtle Planet, by the same guy, this Yun Ru guy, and then I started seeing all these turtles. Like, it sounds nuts. It sounds nuts. And to put, everything, all your life savings and all the money you've spent years working for into something because you saw some turtles. Somebody gave me some shit about that, and you know who you are out there. When I initially told this story, because I think I did mention it on a pod, but I started seeing all these turtles. I saw like 20-something turtles. They were crossing the road. They were coming into my yard. There was like 15 or 16 in my backyard on this log in this lake. And eventually one time I was going out to get groceries, and I was coming back, and there was this giant snapping turtle that got flipped over in the opposite lane. And I saw this truck drive over it and flip this thing over on its back, and it's spinning on its shell in the other lane. So I gunned it and flipped the car around and went out there with a blanket and picked it up, and the thing's trying to bite my fingers off, and saved this turtle. And anyway, somebody might think about that and just be like, dude, how are you even connecting that to Bittensor? But you have to appreciate that when you are in these sort of synchronicity, you're holding on to the golden thread. You're in the vortex of like life all I can tell you is that the things that happen around you when you're in these type of feelings, they all of a sudden everything starts to have sort of a meaning to it. And so there was this turtle stuff, and there's so many other synchronicities I can't even count them that really like continue to just be like, bye, Tao, bye. And I was just at that time too. You have to appreciate the fragility of the project at that time, because Bitensor really now, we're trading at what, around $500 a Tao or something, but there was periods back then when it was under five. And the confidence in this thing, it was just about the idea. Like, if you were to take what was actually happening and try to extrapolate, like, how is this thing going to do 100x or turn into a multi-billion-dollar market cap project? Like, it was very difficult to get there, because like a lot of the people that were involved early on weren't necessarily like awesome at machine learning. Like, a lot of them were, crypto like node operators that had, some of them had like, come from projects like Strong Block or something, like people's experience with this, with like getting involved in fine tuning models was like pretty limited. And early mining on Bittensor, you really didn't have to be an expert in all that stuff. You had to run like good, reliable, rented CPU compute, and that would allow you to be a fantastic miner. So at that time, even the conversations that were going on like in the Discord weren't really ones that you would have today about like, oh, this thing's going to, turn it into a subnet. Everything that you talk about is just going to get eaten by Bittensor, like the little Pac-Man meme of, Tau or Bittensor eventually eating everything. Like, it was just an idea. And so there wasn't even a lot of liquidity back then. There was actually, I can remember it being in the OTC channel, and some guys that are like some of the real OGs of this project set up this OTC channel where you could buy Tau, directly, and there would be moderators, and when you had a deal, you would go into a private chat with the moderator who would like broker the thing, and you would send your Tau. A lot of times I didn't even do that. I just sent people the Tau, and 100% of the time the deals went through. 100%. I never had a problem with a single deal. Hundreds.
Wow.
Never had an issue. That's how I know like the DNA of this community at the OG, the whale level, like the wallets that don't move, and go look at them. There's a lot of them. All these people, like, I'm sure I did deals with most of them, and a lot of them are still involved in the project. We've lost a couple people, but probably we should have lost those people, honestly. You know who you are too out there that aren't holding your bags anymore. But, and then once I started to have these great experiences buying the token, I was going to tell you. Yeah, so I'm in the OTC thing, and this one particular day, I remember just being like, hey, I got, $2,000 here. What's the most Tau anyone will give me for $2,000? And that's how I did the sale. Like, I wasn't even offering like, I'll pay 4 per Tau. It was like, hey, random everybody who wants to get rid of your Tau, you tell me how much Tau you'll give me, and
put in a market order.
It was like, it was backwards for sure. But I think that at that time, any liquidity was like really key, because everyone's trying to keep the mining going. And honestly, like, the project at that time, the most important thing was to just keep the thing chugging along so that OpenTensor could continue to develop the protocol and the code base and draw new talent into the mining pool. At that time, validating, there was only one subnet, so there wasn't really like a lot of validators or something like there is today. There was no kind of like ecosystem of that caliber. But yeah, so after I kind of had that awesome experience and got to know everybody in the community through the OTC stuff, became the moderator, watched the thing kind of mature into the point where eventually we had subnets. And dude, I've never taken my foot off the gas like ever since. I'm still totally in as deep as I ever was, probably even deeper at this point. And yeah, it's an awesome project. I love doing it.
Yeah, that's incredible, the level of trust there to just interact with random discords, be like, I'm gonna send you money, you send me Tau. That's crazy. And your conviction is built all off of basically synchronicities. Basically just random events happening, some people would say. What made you have such like such awareness for these synchronicities in your life? Because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't even notice or would just, see it and be like, oh, that's random and keep moving. Like, don't think twice about it.
Yeah, for sure. Like once I was decided I was going to exit my corporate career, I then embarked on a journey of, you could call it spiritual exploration, you could call it heavy psychedelic drug use, you could call it whatever you want. But I explored many different modalities of getting in touch with not only myself but the world around me and realms beyond this one, and the whole thing. That's a whole nother podcast or series probably. But still always keeping one fingernail scraping on the edge of reality, kind of, and making sure I could still kind of operate all the things I was doing and performing at a decent level with the businesses I was running, but always having an eye kind of on. And I still have this today. If anyone follows me on X, you'll see half the things I'm posting are about Bitensor. Probably the other half or have to do with some kind of spiritual, mystical, psychedelic stuff. And those things will give you, a lot of times, if you're using them kind of properly and in the right mind space, almost like a radar, or like a ability to apply meaning in a way that you can gain kind of value and knowledge from, for the things just happening in your life. Like, I'm actually convinced that these things are probably happening to everybody, you and I, all the time. And most of the time we're just stuck in the 3D, like so deep that we don't even have time to zoom out and notice them or make the connections, like connect the dots between all the different things that are happening. But if you slow down enough and, take a deep breath, you don't have to use psychedelics either. It's breath work can do it, or, meditation. Those are sometimes longer, more requires a little bit more dedication if you take those type of paths sometimes to get to the same spots, rather than just like blowing up the TNT to get to the, the gold. But honestly, that allowed me to look at the world in a totally different way, and all kinds of things that would happen around me had started to, have meaning that then I could act upon. And so that's really the thing that I think set me apart from my previous self, which I spent, a decade without anything meaningful happening to me in a synchronistic way. Of course, great things happen or whatever, but like nothing cool was happening in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, no surprising things were showing up. The turtles weren't like marching through my backyard. Like, but eventually then they started to do that. And it was right around the time Bittensor was, coming into my life. And that sort of cemented my involvement. And then the conviction, really, then, that's a fun story to talk about, getting involved in something when it's, just like a dream in Jacob Steve's, eye or something. But the thing that kept me hooked then was the network evolving into what it is today, and the subnets and the teams and the talent, and running a validator for 2 years myself. I ran every single server, rented all the servers myself. Did all the troubleshooting with the help of AIs, with the help of the subnet owners, other validators like Greg Beard, who runs Rizzo, and Mog Machine, and these guys you could just like bounce ideas off of on how to continue running this thing. And when you're in it every day, then you start to get a much better sense of what's actually being built, because like you could be floating around Twitter, and now I've been doing it now for 2 months and not running the validator almost for that long, that like now I'm kind of on the outside looking in a little bit more, and I can see where it's harder to get a grasp of what's actually going on within the network when you're not in there looking at the logs of your validator, like doing the troubleshooting yourself, seeing the output, seeing the contact with the miners, going into the Discord, seeing all the different like troubleshooting and problems and developments and announcements. And like when you're in it that deep, and I was in it like as deep as anyone for 2 years on the validator side, you get just a very good sense for what's being built. And my spidey sense of like, hey, watch out, this could be a scam, never goes off, because there's certain there's of course there's subnets that are pretty low quality that maybe aren't delivering much value, and some of those are still around today with the 64 we have live. But the majority of these teams are really putting their blood, sweat, and tears, and some really, smart people working, and very large team sizes with educations that way outstrip my own, and skill sets that are very, very hard to basically get focused in on a single project. And these people are involved in Bitensor now and being paid just like anyone would if they were, working at a different job at any of the other, larger tech companies that are into AI. So to see the maturity that is just like that the project has allowed to crop up in these different participants in these different groups has just been awesome to watch too. And it just continues to amaze me that we attract the talent that we do.
Yeah, and you still have one of the largest validators. You child delegate all of your stake now, I believe, though, to Rizzo. So I want to ask you about like the decision making behind that. But I guess going back further in the past, you were a sales guy for tech, basically, for your career. And then you get into Bittensor, which is very technical compared to sales. You had to learn all of these things to run a validator on the fly. What was that learning curve like for you?
Dude, I talk about this. Like my command line interface experience was launching like Duke Nukem, Warcraft 2 on DOS, on like old, Pentium 2 machines, like in the mid 90s. Like and then from then until I found Bittensor, I was never in the terminal. Like I didn't even know what a terminal was. Once, I got done with those, like exploring those different games and stuff when I was younger. So like coming into a coding of experience with Python, not that I'm actually like writing any code or anything, but I did have to interpret like how to deploy the code. And then of course there's always stuff you have to do on the fly to get your validator servers up and running, especially in the early days. Stuff's a lot more plug and play now. The subnets have really advanced. Their GitHubs are like so much better documentation wise and everything. But in the beginning, I was pasting everything into ChatGPT, like just asking it, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? How do I do this with and then I would just copy and paste the code. And the thing is with these servers, like the awesome thing about rented hardware is like you could just like beat it up. You paste anything in there. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And anything that wasn't really working that I couldn't figure out with the help of the AI, then I went to the subnet owners. And like you mentioned, like once you're probably it's harder if you're a smaller validator, but once you're a validator of size, then people pay attention to you a little bit. They want to help you out. So it wasn't some great success story of like after 6 months I learned Python. It was really just I learned how to leverage the AI tools that allowed me to move around in the command line. And then also the subnet owners are really the ones, and the other validators who, when anyone's kind of stumped, there's a few different ways you can reach out and get some help within Bittensor. And like I said before, every single experience was a good one. Every subnet I ever tried to launch on, I successfully launched on with damn near zero experience. And even the stuff that now subnets have built in, so that when you check the logs on what your validator is doing, you can really clearly see like, oh, this is the queries that these are the pings that I have going out to the miners. Here's what's coming back. You can really get a sense of like how the subnet's operating. And so just staring at that stuff every day and thousands of lines of code just running down your screen for 2 years, you just eventually like it starts to become a little bit like second nature, or at least as second nature as it needs to be for you to run your validator properly.
Yeah. And being a big guy, I'm sure everybody's ready to help because they want more weights.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things, and I still have the weights out there, and I try to be totally as fair as possible. I mean, I never done a backroom deal. I don't take any tau on the side. You can go look at my historical weights for all the subnets. I have no outliers ever. Even the subnets that I've funded or that I really just believe in and love the teams of, it's not like I'm pumping those guys up more than I'm pumping up the other ones that I think are great subnets. So honestly, like, I just try to do everything on the up and up in the way that I would want someone to treat me if I was putting in the work that I know that many of these teams are. And that for me over the course of 2.5 years on this project now has paid off every time.
Are you relieved at all that detail's coming so you don't have to set weights anymore?
I am, but like it's now like one of these like old dog new trick things where I have to learn something new and figure out like still have to stay on top of the subnets, right? Because if you're going to play the detail game, you're essentially going to have to put your money where your mouth is and start betting on these things. And yeah, I mean, I'm a little nervous about it, honestly. I think anyone would be because you're just like very protective of the bag that you've built on this project that you believe in. But at the same time, and I've said this on a pod or two recently, like I believe that guys like you and I, like our primary directive at this point with DTAO, coming around the corner on the doorstep, whatever, is to arm the TAO holders or the potential TAO holders with enough alpha, enough data, enough information to make like the best possible decisions on who to put their money behind with no outside influence. Like just do your best to give, or do my best, whatever, to give the subnet owners platforms to share what they're doing. And if you and I and the other guys, Block Chat, I think that are doing the other
Oh, blockmates?
Blockmates, yeah, Blockmates. If we like continue to put these pods out and the novelty search in just like an honest way, that information coming out is the best possible. Tau 360 is going to help as well. These different tools that the public has to get their arms around what these subnet owners are building. That's the best thing you can do for Bittensor, because the optimal sort of like incentivization of the subnets that are truly the differentiators amongst the 64. That's the best thing you can do for the project. As a holder of Tau, the best thing you can do when DTAO comes is to put it in behind the subnet that's gonna, do the most with your backing.
You got what do you think the distribution curve is gonna look like when detail comes? Do you think it will be like super Pareto, like highly focused on those top subnets, or it's gonna be more like uniform?
I think it will be people playing it very safe and betting on the household names that they trust, like a Macro Cosmos, and any of the larger names that are associated with one or multiple subnets. Anything that Namare touches pretty much turns to gold. So those teams and a couple other ones will definitely get like the lion's share of the initial interest. The guys from Targon Manifold Labs, of course, too. Anyone that has a reputation that has doxed themselves, because a lot of the subnet owners are still sort of like flying under the radar a little bit as to who they actually are in the real world, and some of them get away with that. But when we start, when people start having to decide where to put their money, it's a lot easier when you can put a face to the. That's why my validator has been successful, honestly, is because the podcast allows someone to hear exactly how I think. And we were talking before we started recording. I don't do any editing. I think people can probably tell. So you just get to see like myself or Mog Machines out there a lot, or any of these other validators like Roundtable 21 or Rizzo, or someone who like is pretty visible in the Tau space. Like that will extend now into the subnet arena and require those guys as well to not just be friendly with the validators like they are today to get emissions, but they're going to have to get friendly with John Q. Public, and get these guys that are Tau holders that right now have just like set it and forget it on whatever validator for however many months or years they've been staking. And they're going to have to reach out. Marketing is going to become so much more important than it is today. You'll be able to rely on like Tau 360 and some other stuff, or Tau Pill. But nothing's going to replace like the work that you and I do, giving these guys a platform to get into the minds and the hearts of the holders of the token,
How pivotal do you think that platform is? How do you decide on who to allow on, or do you ever turn people away What's your decision process behind who you have on your podcast?
I don't turn anybody away. I maybe don't reply to all of the messages as timely as I should, or get the pods going in the rotation that I would like to. But when someone shows up and in my DMs and says, "Let's do a pod," if they have a subnet, they're on. Like I'll definitely give them space to tell their story. Sometimes you get some requests like, "Hey, we're launching a subnet. Can we pre-record a episode?" Unless it's someone that already has a subnet, I probably don't record with them until they've got their main net slot, because I've got a few other people, already in the queue that they'd have to jump. So I usually don't allow those guys on the hot seat. But anyone's on. Even any validator can come on. Even I did a couple early episodes with just like random, ex guy who didn't like Bittensor and wanted to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I want to do. I want to do one with an anti-Bitensor person one day.
Dude, you can find them. They're available. Like, will they show their face? This is the question,
Yeah, that is the question. Will they show their face?
Mm-hmm.
So you were in Bitcoin back in 2017, got out for gold, got back in Bitcoin, and then got into Bittensor. What do you think lasts longer, Bitcoin or Bittensor?
I think Bitcoin will just be there, kind of like gold is going to be there forever. And Bitcoin will probably be there as long as it can be agile enough to move with some of the quantum computing questions and whatever else, which I think it will be. Energy, this whole idea of energy and time and the time chain and all the stuff that Saylor talks about. Like, I can see where this resonates with a lot of people, of course, and as the number one crypto with whatever 50 or 60% of the market share, it obviously resonates. And I don't think it's going anywhere. That being said, there's a time in the sun for everybody, and AI is just getting started. And people that are in the orbit of this stuff, especially on X or whatever, have an idea kind of what's coming more. But the average person on the street has no idea what's gonna show up. And the next version of iPhones, where you got the AI on there, will do a lot to kind of bring the awareness to most people. But I think it's gonna take AIs coming in and start eating, entire career paths before people kind of like wake up to that stuff. So I do think Bittensor will break out way, way, way bigger in a monster way compared to like the price rise for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is such a kind of like a stable, mature sort of asset at this point. Bittensor's only been around for 3 years, maybe 3.5, depending on when you want to call, the earliest launch, the earliest iteration of the launch of the network. But we have the halving next year, which probably happens about a year from now, maybe 11 months from now. That'll be like a real cool pivotal moment. We'll have maybe 100 something subnets at that time as well. And each new subnet slot is like effectively a sort of like a mini halving, So we have all these mechanisms in to recycle tau for participating in the network with the UIDs. And if you look at some of the tau that's been recycled, like tens of thousands of tau has gone through this process. So we're seeing that tail get pushed out in a really like interesting way to then continue to drive value for the network participants. And I'm seeing like bigger and bigger players constantly getting involved. I do calls with bigger players that I'm ready to talk about right now, that like just talking to them about the network, letting them know like because they hear the podcast, they want to talk with someone that's open about stuff. So the things that are coming next year for sure are going to continue to propel us up and to the right. Like, I don't know how fast and how far, but I'm sure if you measure us, and I don't care about the dollar price as much as I care about the measurement against Bitcoin. And, at the peak of our powers, we eclipsed, so like it was like less than 100 tau to get 1 Bitcoin. Right now it's, right around 200 tau or something to get 1 Bitcoin. I think that will go way under 100 at some point here in the near future. So I don't have necessarily a big price prediction for you. Are we going to break 1,000? When's it going to happen? I don't know. But if you compare us to Bitcoin, I think it moves in a favorable direction, just like it has been since we launched. Like, I'm not saying anything special here. I'm not bucking the trend on anything. Just go look at the chart. You can see where it's going. Anyone can see where it's going.
How much do you pay attention to like politics? You care about the U.S. election at all?
Oh yeah. I pay attention to that stuff. I'm in it.
You're in Cali. You ever consider coming to Texas? For the Austin,
You know,
Bittensor capital?
I got two monster dogs. I got a Leonberger who's like approaching 150 pounds and a Bernese Mountain Dog. So these kind of dogs love being outside and they can't handle the heat. So bringing them down to Texas, like they would never go outside. They would just be stuck in the air conditioning. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it really wouldn't be fair. Now, like if I had to take the values of Texas and like apply it to where I live today, I would do that in a heartbeat. But, California is its own sort of like country almost. There's some really awesome things about living out here. There's also some very, frustrating things about living out here. On balance, obviously you like can't beat the weather, and if you're close to the ocean, that's awesome too. But the politics stuff, like California's, like a lot of the country, just lost its mind, unfortunately. There's pockets of sanity. There's pockets of sanity in California as well, but on balance, especially from a governmental, perspective and a leadership perspective, this people and other states should not be looking at California for guidance.
Yeah, that's advice right there. But I
I'll
guess
tell
to
you
go
one
back.
thing about politics real quick that California did do last, or maybe earlier this year. They passed a bill to like legalize all kinds of different psychedelics. And the governor here, who is even toying around with running for president maybe in the next cycle, vetoed it. And I'm like, what? How could he veto? I don't know why he vetoed this thing. Like, the California is known as like the visionary state, like it could lose this reputation eventually. But I was really surprised that didn't get across the line.
He didn't want to see the turtles.
That's right, dude. I mean, everyone needs a turtle in their backyard, an unplanned turtle visit while they're reading a book about turtles.
What are your thoughts on like the AI agents? Because that's hot right now. People a lot of talk about AI agents. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on AI agents?
I think it'll continue to be hot. Like the AI agents is pretty easy to take in one of these either through an API or you could run something yourself. But it's pretty easy to put a wrapper on something and turn it into an agent at this point. And the wrappers are going to be continuing to be put on the next iteration. So as the backends evolve, the agents will evolve, and Bittensor is going to have all kind. The thing about Bittensor is it's so damn flexible that like, okay, maybe we weren't the first with agents or whatever, but if you think about it, like miners are actually agents. It's just not called an agent. It's called a miner. But especially depending on the subnet that the miner is participating in, it's just like a very focused agent. And that's what people do with miners. They take, especially like early on, you'd take your model, your 7 billion parameter model, you'd fine tune it on a bunch of training data so that it could participate in a subnet in the most effective way, or participate in the only subnet and the only network running if you go back long enough. And that's essentially what is happening with agents. I mean, there's all kinds of different things happening with agents now because AI is developed as well. But we were like the original. We had all the agents before everyone even was calling them agents. And we'll get agent. We already have a couple agent subnets now. I'm sure there's another couple that are going to launch from what I hear going on. And the next, when agents are like, reach the peak of their powers, we'll be right there with a dozen agent subnets probably. And when agents, become kind of like yesterday's news, those subnets will go away and the next big thing will be built on Bittensor, and the network can just, flexibly move into all of these different, little, like, you could call them trends or memes or whatever, but yeah, we're going to be fine. I think agents are cool right now. I think it's fun to like go on and try to figure out, like, this thing tells me it's an AI, but it's kind of writing like a human would. Like, do I think there's an actual AI typing this? Or, like, it's kind of fun to just figure those things out. And when they get their own coins or whatever, then that's going to be a whole different ball of wax. I think some of them already do have kind of their own currencies, but yeah, the agent thing's fun, but it's almost like a distraction at this point, I would say, but some of the technology that's being built now with agents, where you've got, and early on there was something called LangChain, and I think it's still around, but it's a tool to kind of use this like iterative process of like passing tasks on from one AI almost to another. And the way that you can kind of like build agents on top of one another and start stacking these abilities to contribute either through code or social media or trading and financial stuff, like it really just totally opens up the ability for the average person to participate in AI in a way that doesn't require a lot of coding. And I think that's one of the cool parts about it, is it gives someone like when you go on to Dippy, I don't know if you've used the Dippy app,
Yeah.
that the guys from Subnet 11, like, you go on there, you can build you can build your own little agent on Dippy. You give it a background of, who it is, what it likes, if it, whatever. And then when you start chatting, that's who you're chatting with. That's essentially what an agent is anyway. And it's really fun to see like that being opened up to the public and not knowing where it's going to go. I love that stuff. I love the stuff that you have no idea where it's going to land, just like Bittensor. I have no idea where this thing's going to go. Like, the sky's the limit, and it's fun to just be involved in something where you spend half your time not only talking about what's going on, but what could happen,
Yeah, and the fact that it's flexible, like you said, it sort of consumes everything or can consume anything. Would you consider that feature of being able to consume everything AGI?
It's like first of all, I consider us AGI, like
Us
you and me.
humans?
Yeah, I consider us like on the ground floor. We're the original LLM, and we have our consciousness. It's all up in the stored in the great cloud of the Akashic records, or whatever culture, whatever like spiritual spin you want to put on it. But we are essentially like, what has happened at this point? Humans have absorbed all kinds of information from the physical world around us, taken it, digitized it, and then that feed of digitizing information through pictures, video, text, and putting it online has given the AGI like the mountain of data to train upon. You know what I'm saying? And we've now given it enough data, enough digital information from ourselves, feeding the internet and building the internet, essentially, that we've given the artificial intelligence a large enough data set so that now when it wants to create synthetic information, it can actually like retrain itself based on the things we've already fed it, And we were on the ground floor with that. Now, what's going to happen eventually is the AGI is going to get a body in the form of a Optimus or whatever other robot that's out there, and the AGI is going to start bringing in the data from the physical world, whether it's visual, audio, pictures, whatever it is, or even at some point smells, or all the other senses that we don't even have access to, right? Like radio, computers and technology can absorb almost anything, all from the spectrum that we can't even see as people. And that's also, we can't even like conceive of what, it's not just like, it's almost like, it'll also have like sonar and mapping ability and like all kinds of stuff that just is like in the animal world now. But all of that eventually is going to be in the hands of the artificial intelligence, and it's going to start training itself on us, and that is the part where I see something like Bittensor being able to like, as the incentive mechanism, as the incentivization like landscape changes, whether it's through agents or whatever else, we will move along with that, and the network will develop into those directions. And we're flexible enough to just like leave bad ideas in the dust. I mean, over 150 subnets, I think, at this point have been deregistered. So the churn is going, and if you look at like the first few subnets, like look at the first like 32 or something, very few of them are the original subnet that had that slot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a interesting take that we are the AGI, and then I've never heard anyone pose it that way.
It's slow AGI. We're the slow version. The biological version, evolution takes a while. You got to go around the sun a bunch of times in order to give things time to change. But in the future, change is going to be at the speed of computation. I mean, evolution even is going to be at the speed of computation. The human genome isn't going to require, changes in our external environment to be modified. It's going to be modified with CRISPR, 7.0 or whatever version we're on when we start messing with ourselves in a real serious way. And it's going to include things like biological, engineering of, all kinds of different novel stuff that people have had to do the slow way. Like the dogs I was talking about is a great example. Like takes years, decades to like make a dog breed. You're like combining these different could take multiple generations. Same thing with like crops. You're like trying to bring these different crops together, and you're taking the one crop that only grows here and pollinating this other one here, and then you get a hybrid version. But in the future, like when the AI can simulate all of the different DNA sort of like combinations, it's going to start building life, and it'll start with things we don't care about that we already allow, GMO stuff with, which is like plants. Then it's going to be animals. Then some country, it's going to be like illegal here in the US, but some countries are going to allow you to do it for humans. And then all the bets are off, dude. Like, you've seen some of this stuff early on, probably, of like what happens to a human, like the human race, and it'll show like starting 200,000 years ago, it's like a caveman, and then like over the course of just 2 minutes, it like evolves into like some crazy thing you can't even recognize. That's gonna happen. Like, I don't know when it's actually gonna hit, but I promise you it's going to happen, because all it takes is compute, and we have it. So barring world destruction of like meteor or nukes flying across the skies or something, we're going to get there. And that's the stuff that's going to be happening probably while you and I are even still alive in 20, 30 years or something, is just going to be so off the chain. It's going to be unbelievable.
You think the pace of this innovation is limited by our ability to have like sensory inputs to like build that data set?
That's the thing right now. Yes, because right now the robotics and like nanotechnology and stuff, like I would say like 5 years ago, it was actually ahead of AI. Like we were missing the brain. Like, Boston Dynamics had the little dog that ran around, and you've probably seen the Black Mirror episode with the dogs with the machine gun that comes out, the robotic dog. Okay, so now that dog is real. The whole body stuff's designed, and like up until 2-3 years ago, without LLMs, we're like, okay, now we got these robots, but how do we even like control them and tell them to do stuff? How can they learn stuff about their environment and whatever? Now we've got the ability to have on board, essentially a brain. And whether you're connected to the internet or not, this Optimus type robot, these humanoid robots, are going to have the senses that are like they're just going to continue to be kitted out with more and more sensory inputs into their training. And if you have the space, the compute, the sky's the limit as to what can happen. So right now, yeah, I agree. There are some bottlenecks because like not everything is evolving at exactly the same pace. And right now, you're seeing like the minds now get a little bit ahead. Like we're waiting for the awesome humanoid robot, like that could come in, walk your dog, fold your laundry, that only costs like 10, 15K. We're waiting for that. Once that gets here, the mind for that thing is already waiting for it. It's in our computer now, You only need a couple Mac Minis wired together, and you can run the biggest open source LLM on the planet, So we're there. We just now need the hardware. And Elon, thank God we got a couple geniuses left on this planet that have, a bunch of money that are trying to do cool stuff. Not only is he trying to take everybody to space, but he's also going to put the robots, on the ground. And that's going to, again, just change everything.
What do you think the end goal or like the end game is of this type of innovation?
Dude, I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I don't know. I don't know. I do think about it a lot, and I've taken this question into some other spaces where I kind of can get some answers on these things sometimes. And I would say that like the weirdest, coolest, scariest things that you can possibly imagine that will happen as a result of using this technology, all of it's going to happen. Almost all of it. Everything you've seen on, yeah, man, every like movie that you've seen where, whether it's I don't know about the Terminator necessarily. I'm not sure necessarily that the machine's going to be traveling backwards in time. It won't have to because it'll be in this time. But like, dude, the Terminator is basically real at this point. Like, there's not that much distance between where we are at right now and the actual Terminator. So, I mean, we got ways to go on like the bioengineering part where like the skin on the outside of the robot, it actually appears humanoid, and you get over like the uncanny valley of where you like look at these things and they freak you out, but you're not really sure why, that we still have to get over, but we're getting really close. You can see like the steps that video is made, go back like a year and a half ago or whatever. And you've got Will Smith with like eating the spaghetti thing now. And now like, I'm not even sure if that, the promoter on subnet, what subnet is it? It's Wombo's subnet, EdgeMaxing 39.
Yeah.
They've got a very attractive female on there who does their like weekly or bi-weekly updates, and Wombo, of course, like they're awesome at marketing and virality. They know how to play this game. So they have chosen this as the method for delivering, news about the subnet. I'm not even sure that could be AI. I don't know. I think there's a great chance like Ben just like pulls a switcheroo at some point, and maybe it was a real person in the beginning, but once you get 15, 15, 20, 30, however many, little clips of news for edge maxing, then you can plug it into an LLM, and all of a sudden it's an AI and nobody knows the difference.
You could just be building that data set to train it.
That's what it is. Yeah, everyone's
What do you
just
think
kind of a
about
data set.
the ethical implications of all this? Like, do you think robots will get like human rights, AI agents get, rights like that? What do you think will happen?
I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which way the cookie will crumble here. But when we kind of made this decision in the courts that corporations are people and should be treated as people, I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's one of the long-standing sort of like difficulties that give corporations rights to do things that many sort of like environmentalists and other different groups feel is like unfair. Like, oh, we can't treat a corporation like a person. Well, a robot's way more of a person than a corporation is. So I don't know, like ethically, like, do I think we should try and, here's what's going to happen. Like, you saw what happened with that thing that everybody signed last year where like every major AI, builder signed this thing like we should all stop development and pause for, however many months, and nobody did it. Everyone signed it. It got sent out there. Nobody stopped anything. Everybody that signed the stupid thing kept doing everything they were doing and even faster. So, and now like, you have these situations. It's just like, with the nukes, it's like, okay, we got 5,000, they got 6,000, we need another 1,000. It's not the prisoner's dilemma. What's that called when you have to have these, I forget what it's called, but it's a specific thing anyway, where like it's, you have to cut all the trees down, because if you don't cut all the trees down, the town next door is going to cut them all down, and burn them all anyway. So if the trees are going to get burnt, you might as well cut them down first or something. This is like the idea behind artificial intelligence. You can't, if the US stops building and stops advancing, eventually China will pass us and use the technology against us, or eventually Russia will pass us, or eventually whatever country. And that is the thing that has been driving the not only like advancement of like technology and unfortunately weaponry, which a lot of times comes out of technology, the destruction of our whole like biosphere and the planet and driving global warming and all this stuff, like that problem and that like conundrum. That's why that's why everything is being torn down and built up at the same time in the most craziest way possible. And we've already, like, humans have already sort of made their bed in that, like we've already determined, like if the last 500 years are any 400 years are like any clue as to what's going to happen, is it's just going to go until the wheels fall off. And we'll see how long that lasts. Like how long can the planet sustain, everybody like just buying Bitcoin, increasing compute, increasing electrical, capacity or whatever. Like the US now is realized, and especially all of these companies that are buying hundreds of thousands of GPUs, that we are like woefully under prepared for powering all of this technology. And we're like 25% of the capacity of China or something, and China's going to 3x theirs, and we're going to like 2 or 3x ours, but then they'll still be like way ahead of us, And we're in this now position where like all of the energy that we're creating is being used to increase, not all of it, but a lot of the energy we're creating is being funneled into increasing intelligence through training these large models, and you're seeing that happen right now with OpenAI and well, of course, like Tesla and Facebook and Microsoft and Anthropic, and anybody that buys a bunch of GPUs, like the power that the planet is generating, that the human race is generating, is more and more and more being funneled into increasing the technology, increasing the abilities of our technology. And right now that's in the form of these LLMs. And we still haven't found out where the scaling stops. You know what I'm saying? Like the bigger it gets, the better it gets. It keeps happening. The bigger, the better, the bigger, the better. Everyone's waiting like, oh, once the training costs are $1 trillion, then it's going to stop. Like nobody knows. Go look at Moore's law. Like that's the thing where like the compute doubles every 2 years or something. Like it never stopped doubling. It's still doubling. And it's been doubling since like the 70s or something. So who's to say now that we've like reached some kind of plateau after a couple years of training AI? So it's kind of scary to see like where we're going to funnel all that value, and hopefully we can do it while still like maintaining some semblance of what this planet is. Because like, could go off on a tangent here. I'll just say one thing about it, but the saddest thing for me when I see, the impact of technology is the loss of any species, because the Earth and the whole biosphere and every living thing has contributed to, like over millennia and hundreds of millions of years, even, these very special, like unique beings that can do something awesome in their environment. And when those things disappear forever, because we needed more, GPU power, or we needed whatever, that's sad. And so I hope we find a way to balance those things, like and find a way to maintain the diversity and the species that are on our planet, while still like pushing far and as crazy as we can in this direction of intelligence.
Do you think we'll reach the point where we could like replicate these species that have gone extinct, like we preserve their DNA and then rebuild them?
Some of them for sure, yeah. Like the woolly mammoth they essentially have I think 2027 is supposed to be the first, like the woolly mammoth is coming. because you have some of these. It's true. You have some of these species that are in the not just like encased in limestone in the fossil record, but you have like the woolly mammoth is like frozen up there, and they were around like 4 or 5 thousand years ago in some island off the coast of Alaska or whatever. So they haven't even been gone that long, and they're still locked in the ice, and they're still like, when it thaws, it's like, bloody. You could go make like a woolly mammoth steak or something probably. And so the DNA, like you said, is still there. So I think some of these species, yes, we will be able to figure out a way to bring them back. Bring them back to what is the question, right? You're not going to bring them back and put them in the zoo. Is the biome that they lived in even there? So what are they coming back to, I guess, would be the question.
Make them in robot form. You could do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's honestly, like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but that is on the table for sure. I agree.
Who do you think's the first like major company you have like those like top seven, the Fang, to make a subnet?
I want to say, I would love to say Facebook, since they're kind of like the friend of the open source community with open sourcing Llama. I hope it's those guys. I kind of feel like it's going to be Google though. It's just a guess. I have no idea. I don't know a bunch of people over there or anything, so I can't say it in an educated way, but it feels like it could be Google. Like Google should have an arm of their operation. They're kind of like they're coming out with some crazy stuff now, especially, but they're kind of like one of these companies that does tech, but they're stuck in the old way of operating. So we'll see like if they're flexible enough to create a subnet or not. I hope they are.
As someone who's been in this game since 2022, before subnets, what's been the most meaningful like part of your journey within Bitensor for you?
There's a couple things I would share. One is I love seeing when people come in and they're like, "How do I start mining?" And then I might have a little conversation with them, and then they talk to some other people, and then like I'm going through the Discord one day, and 6 months later I see him in there like telling someone else about something on a subnet. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen that happen quite a few times now. So that's really encouraging for me to see other people kind of making their dreams come true about making money on their own and coming into Bittensor and kind of carving out a niche for themselves. That's always fun to see. It's just, for me, it's the community. And at this point, having done, a few dozen podcasts and being pretty close with some of the validators and subnet owners, being on this sort of like journey together of taking this project to the next level and continuing to iterate on everything, and everyone kind of having their role and using their skills at whatever they can to bring Bittensor to the most people possible, in the best form possible. It's really fun to be on the journey with the people that we have in this project. I know every project has their communities, otherwise they wouldn't be a project if they didn't. But I truly do believe that this community is something special. So it's the people for me. Yeah.
And I'll wrap it up with this because we've been going for a little minute here.
Cool.
What advice would you have for me as a podcaster in Bittensor?
Well, we talked about it a little bit ago, but you are like you're just a way for someone else who's putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this thing to get some face time with the people that are interested in what they're building. That's what I look at myself as. I'm just kind of like the conduit for the information. So when you go in to Discord or GitHub, or you use one of these tools like Taupill or Tau360, or from the conversations you had, and you get this knowledge base together that allows you to have like, and I've watched some of your pods, they're awesome. You like when you can ask educated questions that allow people who are interested in this project to get maybe a fresh or a different perspective than what they would normally be able to get from, one of the different social media outlets or whatever. Like that for me does something pretty special, because that's a unique offering that someone as a subnet owner just can't generate on their own, you know? So the ability for you to have these quality conversations with people will eventually lead you to the best spot I think you can be in. As long as you just kind of honestly go into the, into the podcasting game as someone who's really seeking to give people a platform to share whatever they've built, and then let them ride or die based on whatever they, you can't like handhold some of this stuff. Like I've done a couple podcasts, and at the end of it, I'm just like, I'm lowering the weights on that one. Like that's, like it doesn't happen very often, honestly. Only just a handful. But most of the time I come out of the podcast like freaking out because I'm like realizing the next big thing about AI, especially after I talk to someone like anyone from Wombo or like Parshant from Omega or like the Macrocosmos guys. Like when you start talking to people who have like huge ideas and then are executing on them all the time, you're just like, oh my gosh, everything is going to happen, like, because I keep seeing everyone in this project keeps calling their shots about what they're going to build, and it keeps coming true every time. Even with like Subnet 51 and the H100s, they've had like a couple hundred H100s available now. Like it's like a bunch of Babe Ruths just like coming up to the plate, and everyone, when you think like crypto is just full, like of course, like of the last 15 years, so many people have been rugged in every way possible. And I just encourage people to find a project where there's real people like you and I talking to real people that are building subnets with, real intelligence coming out of them in the form of these commodities, and lean on that stuff rather than the, whatever the pick of the day is or whatever.
Absolutely. Well, Keith, it's been a pleasure chatting. Your podcast was a big influence for us to start this one. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Grant.